Do you want to win more gunfights? Do you want to make your enemies rage quit and uninstall the game? Do you want to impress your friends and your teammates with your insane flicks and headshots? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then this guide is for you. Crosshair placement is the secret sauce that can take your aim from potato to pro in Valorant. It's all about keeping your crosshair at the right location at all times so that you can shoot faster and more accurately than your opponents. It's like having a cheat code that gives you an edge in every encounter. In this guide, we're going to be teaching you everything that you need to know about crosshair placement, such as why crosshair placement matters more than aim, how to find head height without using a ruler, how to adjust your crosshair for different situations like a pro, and finally, how to practice your crosshair placement without getting bored. Crosshair placement matters because it affects your reaction time, accuracy, and consistency. By keeping your crosshair at head height, you reduce the distance and time that it takes to move your mouse when you see an enemy. This gives you a better chance of landing a headshot before they can shoot back. Additionally, by keeping your crosshair at the optimal position, you avoid unnecessary movements that can throw off your aim. For example, if you keep your crosshair too low or too high, you will have to flick up or down when the enemy appears. This can cause overshooting or undershooting, which can make you miss your shots. Notice how in this clip, the player has their crosshair positioned in just the right spot so that when the enemy swings, they don't have to adjust it at all. This is an example of perfect crosshair placement and is something that you should try to emulate in all of your games. Finally, by keeping your crosshair at the same level as much as possible, you develop muscle memory and consistency. Rather than needing to train your muscle memory for all sorts of different flicks, instead you train it for small familiar flicks that are more easily controlled. This means that you will be able to aim more instinctively and confidently in your matches over time. When you watch this clip of this player in the background, take note of how they move their crosshair as they maneuver around the map. They are always tracking their next location that the enemy can swing them from and preparing themselves for a duel. The reason for this is at high levels in Valorant, if you get swung while your crosshair is not positioned and ready to fight, you're as good as dead. This is part of the reason that it's so powerful to fight enemies with a teammate, because realistically their crosshair can only be prepared for one fight at a time, so by fighting together you make it far more likely that the enemy player will lose the duel. Finding head height is crucial for good crosshair placement. The reason that you want to aim for the head is quite simply because it does the most damage. Higher damage means faster kill times, and in Valorant, when you can die in just one bullet, it's very important that you're killing your enemies as quickly as possible. With this in mind, it's important to remember that there are boxes everywhere by design to help you locate head height. The boxes on the map are head height for every single agent of Valorant, giving you a clear indicator of where your crosshair should be when clearing these angles. These landmarks may seem silly to some. Many players maybe even ask, do good players actually use these things? And the truth is, actually, yeah, they do. As you become more skilled, you'll notice when fighting on leveled ground with your opponents, it's relatively easy to locate head height. But once you start mixing in elevation, it becomes much more difficult. That is where you'll find these markers so helpful, because depending on the angle that you're fighting an enemy, it may become more difficult to locate exactly where you should be placing your crosshair. But by keeping an eye on your environment, you can figure out how to quickly correct your crosshair placement and land that kill. Take note of this clip in the background, how the player uses the wall in the back to line up their crosshair. As you can see, it's incredibly helpful and definitely should be used. You can use other map landmarks such as doorways, windows, walls, signs, etc. as references for head height. These landmarks should be kept and drilled into your mind so that you can always have your crosshair held at head height. We do recommend getting comfortable with your crosshair placement when fighting on a leveled battlefield though. To do this, you can use the practice range or deathmatch to help you learn where you generally are going to need to aim. When every enemy is on a leveled playing field, it's as simple as keeping your crosshair at one specific height. However, notice how when we jump up on this ledge, all of the bots suddenly have very different head positions. It's important to keep this in mind in games so that you're prepared for gunfights before dueling a player with an elevation advantage. As you watch this clip in the background, notice how the player practices their crosshair placement in deathmatch, walking around the map, making sure to prepare for every single gunfight. As they flick between angles, notice how their crosshair never dangles between a wall, but instead is always right next to the location that they can be swung from. As they walk around the map, you'll see how their crosshair adapts to each elevation change in distance. This is what we call good crosshair placement. While keeping your crosshair at head height is generally a good rule of thumb, there are situations where you will need to adjust it slightly depending on various factors such as distance, angle, cover, movement, etc. For example, when peeking around corners or holding angles, you should keep some distance between your crosshair and the edge of the corner or angle. This is because enemies may peek out wider than expected or swing out fast with momentum. If your crosshair is too close to the edge of cover, then it may not give you enough room for adjustment. Similarly, if your crosshair is too far from the corner, the enemies may peek shorter than expected, and then you might have to end up adjusting your crosshair more than you like as well. well. This is why it's important to find that sweet spot in the middle where you find that it gives you enough time to react to the player's peek and land your shot. Other things that you may want to consider for your crosshair placement are if the enemy is low HP. If they are low HP, then you actually won't need to aim for the head because they will likely die in one body shot anyway. In this case, because the body is an easier target to hit, you may want to aim a bit lower to give yourself a higher chance of landing your shot. Maybe you're faced with a situation where the enemy can come from 2 spots. Which one do you place your crosshair at? Well, optimally, first what you want to do is reduce the amount of angles that you can be peeked from. Because you can only put your crosshair in one place at a time, you never want to expose yourself to multiple angles at once. So to do this, what you should do is place any sort of cover between one area and then hold your crosshair at the other to prepare for a peek. If time continues to pass and you don't see anyone peeking you, eventually what you want to do is reposition in a way where you can now place cover between the first angle and peek the other one. You'll often see professional players will do this action multiple times when they're unsure of where an enemy is, until they are able to locate that target. This reduces the likelihood that they will be caught off guard and gives them a much better chance of landing their shot. Finally, practicing crosshair placement is essential for improving in Valorant. One of the most common questions we get on this channel though is, how do I practice my crosshair placement? Let's dive into that a little bit. First, we recommend figuring out your preferred sensitivity and crosshair style in Valorant. As you know, sensitivity affects how fast you can move your crosshair and adjust your aim, so it's very important that you're comfortable on whatever sense that you end up picking. Make sure you're able to glide your crosshair around corners smoothly without having to pick up your mouse too much, as every time that you pick up your mouse in game, you'll be very vulnerable. The key word here though is smoothly. If your sensitivity is too fast, you might find it hard to control. Crosshair style, on the other hand, is going to affect how comfortable and confident you are with your aim. It won't affect any physical aspects of your aim, but rather it's mostly mental. If you're using some wacky crosshair, it might make it harder for you to focus on the actual game and land your shots. We recommend that you experiment with different settings until you find out what works best for you. And remember, if you see a crosshair that you like in game, while spectating the player, you can type /cc in chat to copy their crosshair. After you have your settings, we recommend loading into a deathmatch and practicing your crosshair placement there. As you walk around the map, practice pre-aiming angles before you peek them and get a good idea of where your crosshair should be. If you're wrong and you have to correct your crosshair after peeking, then you know that you have to go back and do it again. You'll figure out what elevations you have to aim at for each peek and slowly start to improve. By doing this, you'll get to see firsthand what it's like fighting enemies on different elevations and how it feels to glide your crosshair around as you trace the corners of each wall. There is no shortcut to improving your crosshair placement, but this should be a really good way to speed up the process and become a better player as fast as possible. Finally, let's take a look at a few rounds in which players showcase excellent crosshair placement to give you a better idea of what this actually looks like in game. Our player that we're going to be looking at is Cryo, who is known for his exceptional crosshair placement and aim. Take a look at how he lets his crosshair do all the heavy lifting in his kills, pretty much only needing to make some small adjustments with it for each engagement that he takes during this 4K. The first kill you'll notice comes as he strafes around C long. His crosshair is positioned for anyone who may be holding behind the default box, and although the player is in the open a bit, he only has to make a small adjustment to land this kill. Then, immediately after killing this player, you'll notice how he gets ready to take a fight on anybody who could be playing in Cubby. Although this player is standing closer than expected, because he was prepared for this duel, he once again makes a small adjustment and gets a second kill. Afterwards, you'll notice how he approaches sight. He wants to limit the amount of areas that he could be shot from, so quickly he smokes the angle on his left, and then positions his crosshair towards logs to take his third duel. Finally, after this fight is over, you'll notice Cryo recognizes the last enemy is back sight and begins to pre-aim to the left of his omen smoke. Many players, when they encounter smokes like this, they will aim directly in the center. However, this is incorrect, as any enemies that you are going to fight are going to be peeking from around the smoke. Cryo traces the outside of the smoke and eventually finds his fourth kill, securing the round. As you can see, Cryo makes all of these adjustments incredibly quickly due to muscle memory and experience playing the game. It will take a ton of practice, we're not going to lie to you, but this is what crosshair placement looks like at the top level. Let's take a look at another round to give you more of an idea of what good crosshair placement looks like. This clip is short, but I wanted to showcase what we call the slicing the pie method that we've covered in multiple videos in the past. Slicing the pie refers to the act of pre-aiming and clearing each individual angle in a room until you find your target. You want to slice the pie if you get the sense that the enemy could be holding the angle on the other side of the wall. If the enemy is holding the angle and you quite simply just walk into it, it's very likely that they will land the shot on you and kill you very quickly. In this scenario, you'll notice that the enemy Raze throws her paint shells somewhat in Cryo's direction, signifying that they might have some sort of idea that he's pushed up. When he sees this, you'll see that he swiftly peeks the first angle that he suspects that they'd be holding, and then immediately after begins to pre-aim the next angle that he'd like to peek. Because of these swift peeks, he's able to catch the enemy off guard and lands a pretty lucky collateral kill for his team. It's only lucky though because he got 2 players here, which is definitely more than he bargained for. But overall, this is a great showcase of how you can slice the pie effectively and get the jump on your enemies. Finally, in our last clip, I want you to take note of how Cryo's crosshair placement is always at the location where you could take a fight, essentially at all times throughout the round. It's not like crosshair placement is only relevant when you're taking duels, because you don't exactly always know when you could be taking a duel. At the start of this round, you'll notice Cryo is pre-aiming sewers on Pearl, waiting for an enemy to crouch through the tunnel. You'll notice because he knows the enemies have to crouch through this hole, he's aiming lower than normal. Once the enemies start to execute onto B though, he begins to rotate. As he rotates over, he holds the small one-way below the enemy's Astra smoke. Although nobody peeks him here, he definitely has the right idea, looking for a kill through this small opportunity. Once the smoke fades though, he quickly pre-aims the box outside of Elbow, looking for a duel. This was all just prep work leading up to the clutch. He's looking for an easy opportunity at a kill, but now it's time for his team to retake. Cryo walks up to Elbow and quickly pre-aims the first angle when he peeks. This stuff comes from time, as mentioned before, but the more familiar you are with the angles, the more confident that you can be with your peeks. Cryo lands the first kill onto the enemy holding spawn and starts to look for anybody trying to trade the kill. Once he sees nobody is coming for the trade, he starts to expect that there is another one Hall. So, once again, he pre-aims Hall and goes for another peek. After these first 2 kills, the retake gets a little bit more dicey due to the enemy KO's flashes, but you'll notice how Cryo is always prepared for the fight to take place in front of him still. Flashes are a great way to disrupt the enemy's crosshair placement and take them off the angle, which is exactly why you'll see the enemy KO throws them through the Astra wall to give his Killjoy an opening to peek. To make this fight easier though, you'll notice that Cryo moves to the right in an attempt to avoid the flashes, but also to keep a majority of the Astra wall in front of him so that anyone who swings through will be in his line of sight. He stays true to this after taking out the Killjoy and tapping the spike, preparing himself for the KO to swing through any part of the wall so that he can land the kill. In this situation, it's hard to predict what part of the Astra wall KO will end up pushing though, so you'll notice Cryo keeps his vision fairly centered so that he is prepared for either scenario. Sometimes you're not going to be able to achieve optimal crosshair placement for every single fight, but by preparing as much as possible, you'll absolutely give yourself the advantage in your matches. Hopefully with all of these tips though, you've been given a glimpse of what good crosshair placement is and how you can perfect it in your matches. If you're really looking to master your aim though, remember that we have a full 40-minute course available on the SkillCapped website where we break down all of the fundamental skills needed to master and become an aim god as fast as possible. Along with that, our site subscription comes with a full access to our Discord where you can contact any of our Radiant coaches directly and ask them any questions that you've been thinking about the game and how to improve your own play. They'll take a look at the games that you recorded and give you first-hand feedback on everything you're doing wrong and how to start ranking up. We really do care about your improvements, so much so that we offer a rank improvement guarantee, meaning that if you don't climb while using our service, you'll get your money back. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below for a discount code, and other than that, we will see you there. That's going to do it for us here today. As always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.